All right, hi, welcome to Startup Business TV. I'm Richard Moore and thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 3, and if you haven't seen any other episodes before or are new to Startup Business TV, the premise I put together was a very simple one. Each episode, which is 25-30 minutes long, the idea of it is to simply focus on one business, usually a well-known one, and we're going to look at how they grew or have grown. And the idea is to be able to walk away from this episode with 3 lessons that you can implement in your own business. So as a startup business owner or as an entrepreneur of some kind, there are always going to be great lessons you can learn from companies. Just because they're huge, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't put into practice things they're trying. And what we tend to find is that we focus a lot on the successes of businesses and try to learn from that, but there's often a lot of mistakes and errors that they make as well. We need to try and avoid those as well. And moving forward, this is going to be really an interesting one because much like the previous edition, when we looked at Starbucks and Howard Schultz as the CEO, and it very much became he created a real culture shift in terms of drinking coffee, and that was very much down to the man. Here is going to be something similar in the sense that the CEO is worth analysing briefly as well. Now, this company is so important that they're in their 22nd year now, and the interesting thing about them is that from very, very humble beginnings, they grew very quickly. One of the reasons why they grew quickly was the CEO, but also another reason why they grew quickly was that they were focused very much on the right kind of space, as in the right kind of industry to start with. And we're going to look at that in a moment. So the company we're going to run through today is Amazon. Okay, well known to pretty much all of you. I'd be stunned if any of you watching this now haven't had some interaction with Amazon at least. And like or loathe what they've done to the retail world, they certainly have had a massive impact on it. Those of you who don't know the CEO, and importantly for this session, the founder, it was Jeff Bezos, and still is. He's still CEO and chairman. So it was founded in 1994. So this isn't going to be the lesson, but I still think it's worth bringing up. The way in which Jeff Bezos came about the idea of founding Amazon, or at least the idea of Amazon, was that he was aware of this huge offering of a new technological platform in the internet. So in 1994, I don't know if any of you were around back then. I'm sure some of you were. And back in 1994, these were really interesting years for me. I was 14 back then, so I was born in 1980. And it was an interesting time because we were starting to get our home PCs. People would, in some kind of abundance now, most people would have a PC at home. And we were starting to look at getting it hooked online. Now, what Jeff Bezos read famously, if you do any research on it, you'll see this number, 2,300%. What he read was that month on month, okay, the internet in this time, I don't know specifically when he read it, was growing by a rate of 2,300% in terms of users, I would, as I understand it. And what he saw, and at the time he was working on Wall Street, okay, so he was, he'd gone to Stanford, I believe it was, and then he ended up in a Wall Street firm for several years. But he decided that he wanted to. It was this idea of a minimal regret strategy he had. He didn't want to regret missing any more of the crazy growth that was coming with the internet. So with that in mind, he decided to kind of, I suppose, take a punt on it, but also. This guy, as we'll see a bit later, was focused on detailers rather than hype. So what he did was he said, well, I need to do something with the internet. And I think it's worth pausing here because you find that nowadays, and at time of recording it's 2016, there are a lot of closed mindsets when it comes to growing something new in a completely new space. Because what I'm saying here is that many people have this strange mentality that it's all been done now, and all you're doing is kind of reiterating things that have been previously done, working in kind of the same space that has already been worked for a long time. And to an extent, yes, you know, the internet is a major cultural shift, a reason for major cultural shift in humanity, really, in terms of what it's brought about in the last couple of decades. But it doesn't mean that new innovations won't come about. But what we are saying here is that he did sit down and identify where things could really grow fast. And what he did was he said, right, if it's growing at this rate, I want to make use of this huge growth rate, but I need to make sure I do it the right way. And this is something you should be bearing in mind when you're starting a business. It's about something you should be passionate about as a platform, but at the same time, you need to be thinking to yourself, well, looking to building my product, in what form should I be bringing it to the market? In what way would it create the greatest traction? Okay, and that's going to relate to one of the lessons in a moment. So what Jeff Bezos did, he did this famous list of 20 items. Okay, the list of 20 items is something you should all be doing. Okay, or something along these lines. Essentially, what he's doing is rationalizing what types of products, as in what routes to market he should be working with. So his idea was, right, I want to do an online store, but what should I be selling? And within this was things like CDs, which at the time, back in 1994, it was pretty much the only thing as a teenager I was buying online. And you've got to understand there was a lot of reticence about purchasing things online. Getting out your credit card and putting it online was seen as a little bit of a dodgy thing to do because people were a little unsure of it culturally. So people were buying smaller items then, CDs and and books and DVDs. We did have DVDs back then. Okay, so what he was doing was he was saying, so what do I think it's going to be that could really help me leverage this number the most? And in fact, books came out of this as the winner, because what he said to himself was, look, the world needs books. Literature is a thing that people are always accessing. And yeah, same with CDs and DVDs. And I'd like to think, I don't know this for sure, but I'd like to think he saw with CDs and DVDs, at least for this time, so much change. You had mini disc players, you had cassette tapes, and all things changing all the time. Laser discs then gave way to DVDs after having videotapes before all of that. And it's a case of, well, things are changing all the time, but books is something that's been around for a long time. So he went about focusing on books to begin with. And the idea was he wanted to catalogue 1 million titles. So pretty much when it launched, and it was Amazon, officially called Amazon, in fact, in 1995. The fun story, if you've watched any YouTube on Jeff Bezos, there'll always be a bit where they do the video clip of him doing the story about what he originally was going to call it. He was going to call it Cadabra, as in abracadabra, the magical thing. And he was telling someone about this on the phone, and the guys at the end of the phone misheard him and went, cadaver. And it instantly said, well, that's it, this name's not going to fly. So it then ultimately it was going to call it something else as well, but it sounded apparently a bit sinister, so we ended up with Amazon, because of course Amazon's an immensely long river with many tributaries and things like that. And later on, many of you will be aware there's this little arrow that looks like a little smiley face between A and Z, because they were just being clever with their name as well. So it's all very much worked out. But the key thing here is he said, right, I'm going to launch with 1 million titles on the catalogue. In a virtual catalogue, you can get away with stuff like this. So he was getting these catalogues from everywhere. And this is going to lead into the first lesson in a second. But up against his competitors, so these were, of course, the physical bookshops, so the likes of Barnes and Noble and the likes of Borders. What he did, horrific handwriting, apologise. What he did was he said to himself, right, if these are, have catalogues, I think Barnes and Noble had catalogues of the region of 300,000 titles. If I could have 1 million, it's just gonna, there's a major differentiator, not least that it's the internet. You have other differentiators as well. So he's looking firstly at what product can leverage this growth the best. Okay, so what's going to be most mainstream. Then he's looking at what things he can leverage to give himself the edge. Of course, things like the tax is something you can overcome. At least he did back then with being online. So local taxes and things like that. And the fact that he would be able to, well, he could make sure that he could ship all over the world rather than only be set in a particular location, because some bookshops, of course, are physically there and they rely on people to come to their physical location as opposed to shipping out. So this is obviously a wonderful start, okay, but where we wanted to go from here was a very important place. But before I get into that, the key thing to be aware of is that this was obviously then paying off, because I think it was something like within 2 months, he was getting, the business was generating $20,000 a week. Okay, so he was working a huge volume. This is not easy. Anyone who's read there was a biography written by Brad Stone a year or so ago, a couple of years back, called The Everything Store, and it's very interesting because you feel like, wow, this guy must be killing it. There's very little profit in this because you've got to buy the books, and when it's online, you've got a catalogue of 1 million and you've got $300,000 startup capital from your parents. You can't go buy all these books, they cost a lot. So what you need to do is be agile and quick. You need to basically say, the moment I get a book, I need to go order it and then get it shipped out. It's very difficult to make much profit, and I believe it wasn't till 2001, if I'm right, when the business had something in the region of $1 billion in revenue, that they actually posted a profit of $5 million. So one thing I wanted to bring in here was that he grew very quickly, but what he was doing was something very special and something that really set itself aside as a business model from those that were around it. And what that was focusing on this, is value to the customer. Okay? This is diametrically opposed because of the tight margins you get as a result. So if I'm selling a book at a minute margin, so I barely make any profit on it, then it's great to be competitive with these guys. But when I have investors in my business, which Amazon very rapidly did because they needed to rapidly expand, I end up in a position where my investors are thinking, they're scratching their heads going, well, the company's generating great revenue, but where's the profit here? And this return here equaled something in the region of 1 cent per share, I believe. So I didn't get much in the way of a great return early on. Obviously, things came on leaps and bounds later on in terms of revenue. But throughout, this has been one of the major points of differentiation as a business that's customer focused, that Amazon really has led. And at some point last year, I was in touch with a chap called Robin Terrell, who at the turn of the century, so it was around this kind of time, he was the managing director of Amazon here in the UK. So Robin Terrell is a wonderful chap, and he actually helped me out with my 8-step startup course. So that's the 73 lessons from people like him to help build a business. And he said the big piece of advice he would give, which came obviously direct from Bezos, which was very much focused on this, was do everything in your power to learn about your customer. Okay, and that then feeds into giving the customer the best thing. What happened later on was that he actually was so customer focused in terms of providing the great value that ultimately it made the situation where sometimes internally there were great conflicts because people were actually losing out with the business, focused so much on the customer as opposed to even looking after its own. So when this happens, what you get is a number of things. The business itself has to suffer for the customer. The investors have to suffer for the customer. But the abundance of people out there who provide the revenue for the company, they're the customers. And so his big thing, slightly Walmart-esque, is to have minimal margin as a way of overtaking and obliterating any competitors. And the likes of Barnes & Noble, for a number of reasons, they went out of business, and you could argue that they were late to the internet party. Certainly the likes of Borders did the same. But what happened was, these guys are selling books, physical books, at, $13 or whatever it might be to try and make themselves their profit. Whereas the likes of Jeff Bezos would be setting up agreements where they would buy the books and then they would sell them at $9.99, and they'd often be making a loss. But his view was, if you make a massive loss, it means people are buying from you though, as opposed to from these companies. And this is going to feed into another one of the lessons. This will all come together. You'll see exactly what this is all about in a moment. So minimal margins, paying himself last, and interestingly, as an interesting side fact, only recently, I don't know if it's changed, Jeff Bezos as a CEO, this guy right now, this company is worth a lot of money. He's taking from the company, I know his net worth was at $34 billion right now. He's taking this, $80,000 a year. So in your home or on your mobile, you're holding a phone. We're talking about a CEO of a top company. Put your hand up if you make over $80,000 a year. Many people in the States probably do that. But as a CEO even, he's not taking, if you look at Howard Schultz, from last episode in Starbucks, the guy's making some mad amount in stocks each year, but well over $1 million in terms of compensation as a CEO. That's not the mantra here of Jeff Bezos. So we can talk non-stop about how things grew from there, and the interesting thing was that after focusing firstly on books, he then decided to grow on, and we're going to see this in play in a little bit. So drawing a line, the 3 lessons are really, really valuable, and I would say from all the companies I have researched over the years, and I make it my business to be as much as possible a real student of companies that have grown and succeeded and have failed, because of course it feeds into the work I do. What I've found is that some of the things that Jeff Bezos has got as his central core points of focus, they really are refreshing, even though they're also very obvious. And typically they relate to a couple of things: the customer and growing. Okay, and that's really where all thoughts seem to come from. So first one, which was a mantra almost a slogan, very early on, it was this: get big fast. Okay? I was watching a documentary on this. I think Bloomberg did a documentary some time ago on the growth of Amazon, and there was one of the early employees. He said, get big fast was about land grabbing in the internet. So as this thing was booming, it was a case of saying, we cannot blink. We have to move so fast and keep growing and keep innovating, because we've got to take as much market share as we can as everyone is starting to establish themselves online. Okay, and this is the thing: if you have identified a niche, okay, something fresh, you need to land grab hard and get big fast. Because if you take it easy, what happens is that other people get the same idea eventually. People always will, and then they overtake you. Once that's happened, it's tremendously difficult to get ahead again, especially when the market is starting to mature. And so you may be thinking, well, that's only applicable if it's a brand new space or a brand new niche. No, it's not. You can work in something completely, traditional. Let's take an example. Let's say I want to work as a real estate agent. They've been around since the dawn of time, right? There's been real estate agencies going on for many, many years. And if I'm going to take people physically to a property, you might argue there's no innovation in that. That's nonsense. And I think only recently someone was posting about making use of, I think it was actually Gary Vaynerchuk from VaynerMedia talking about the making use of Snapchat. It's not something that's been done so much. If you look to the world of real estate online, it's the same old thing. Everyone's looking the same. They've got a nice little profile. They've got their picture of their face. Fine, they're on Facebook, and all they do is advertise the current house they're actually selling. You might think, if you take this example and run with it, you might be thinking, well, what else would you possibly be doing? You've got to think of something completely different. You really have. Maybe you become more of a community personality. If I was working in that space, I would be looking at the local area I'm working within and trying to become more of a local brand, and local as in the person, myself, not the company I work with. Handing out business cards which don't have you in them, it has just the company name, mean that all you're doing is you're trying to promote the brand of your business. Well, how is that different to anyone else? Whereas when it's you, when you become become the go-to person, as it's often referred to, a local celebrity, then suddenly well, not suddenly, but over the course of time, you tend to find that people start seeking you out because you're the guy for real estate in that area. Do you see what I mean? So it becomes your patch, and like I say, you become a bit of a local celebrity. So what they were doing early on was they were saying, right, you know, we need to make sure that the business, as the internet starts to grow, we need to make sure we're land grabbing and getting that market share. But my lesson here is, if you find some kind of industry or niche that you want to work in, when you give it, as you should, your own personal twist, because there should always be something as a differentiator or something unique about it, then you're going to be in a position where you can run with that style or way of working. And one thing I'm finding more and more is, if you look to the online world and people building businesses, it's moving away now from look at me, advertising, post about how great I am, post about how many sales I've made, and it's starting to move more towards about being authentic and actually being normal again and being a real person, because people smell, for want of a better phrase, they smell the bullshit a mile off now because we've been exposed to it so much. So get big fast, but do it in a way that's going to be excuse me, it's going to be more able to gain you some market share. That's an enabler in turn to help you get fast even more. And so what happened was, when I believe they got their first $1 million in revenue, which was very, 2 months in, they'd hit every single state and a number of other countries as well. But very early on, they hit their first million. And there's a wonderful moment, and it's mentioned in this biography, The Everything Store, where someone comes up to Jeff Bezos and says, look, that's $1 million in revenue. We should have a party. And he said, that's not the way I want to do things around here. There's going to be a lot of milestones. Let's get back to work. And there's this feeling of, you've just got to keep finding another gear, relentless focus on getting as big as possible, so that there's no chance that someone might overtake you or kind of beat you down. And the direct consequence of this, some of you won't be old enough to even remember it. Hopefully, I'm sure most of you are, but maybe not quite old enough. You know, in 2000 or so, or 2001, you had the dot-com bubble burst. But because they were big by then, relatively speaking, it made for obviously a lot of other things as well, but made for a very robust business, which then rode out this storm. Okay, and what it means is, if you're getting big, recessions are phenomenal if you play it right in businesses. Okay, the next recession will come. I'm not going to say when it is because I don't know. The last one, 2008, was a very interesting time. Just as an aside, in 2008, I was in a business run by an inspirational CEO who was loving the recession because he was a cash-rich business, okay, and he saw all of his competitors either hibernating, trying to get to kind of survive by joining together, or going out of business. And they were tightening their belts, not spending any money. And he said, I love this time because this is where I get ahead. And he was buying businesses, taking market share, and we were ripping customers from people because they couldn't survive. So getting big fast is phenomenal also for riding out recessions. This stuff is inevitable. It might be in a year, excuse me, it might be in a few years, but there will be another recession. If you look at any basics of economics, you'll see this kind of cycle. So this is very effective. This should be an attitude you have. Don't coast and think that things over time will generally, snowball and work for you. You need to have the attitude, I need to be there as fast as possible. So what can I do now to get bigger? Okay. And this is something I've taught in my courses. There's a difference between growing, so maybe adding staff or another location or something like that, growing when you feel comfortable, as opposed to growing when you can. Okay, so say it again, there's a difference between growing when you feel comfortable and growing when you can. So what I'm saying here is, when you personally and emotionally start feeling, okay, I've got a bit more money now, things are going okay, let's look at what I'll do next. That's not going to be as aggressive enough, as opposed to, can the business technically grow now? Is it possible? Okay, not do I want to? Nothing about your emotion. Is it possible to do it? If the answer is yes, then you need to do it. one of my businesses a while back, I remember it was in a startup phase, and it was just inside the first month of operations, and I'd literally pre-launched it, I got it going, and it was moving so fast, and I said to myself, is it possible to start building a team now? Yes, it's possible. It's going to be painful. It will mean I have to work harder to get more revenue to cover and so on, but let's do it. And I think by the end of the the second week of the second month, I had a team of 5 people. Okay, it was possible. It was painful, but it was possible, and that's how you get big fast, and that's how you grow, and that will help you. Okay, so number 2, your next lesson. This is a real. If you really want to understand Jeff Bezos and how he manages to constantly bring out things that just seem to work all the time, it's this. It's not just innovating, and I'm going to write here, so innovation, okay? And I think it was Jeff Bezos who said you should innovate your way out of problems. So essentially, you know, if you are, a great example is if you're low on capital, I've said this before in a recent post, if you're a week or 2 before the end of the month, you've got bills to pay, what you don't do is say, I've got no money, I don't know how I'm going to do this, I'll just have to kind of eat frugally and not spend any money, I won't go out for the rest of the month. You need to innovate your way out of the problem, and this goes exactly for your business as well. And often what I suggest to people I work with is, instead of thinking about what money you have or don't have, think about what money you can go and get. Or indeed, forget the money altogether and go see what you can build without it. You know, can you call in favors now? Can you approach this problem in a different way? Do you even need the thing you think you need? Or you can grow in a different particular direction. And Kostas Andriopoulos, who's Associate Dean of Entrepreneurship at a business school here in London called Cass Business School, he said to me there's actually a thing, a kind of a business model that he teaches about called the ambidexterity model. And the ambidexterity, of course, if you know the word, it means, you know, is both sides. So often it's a word that's used to relate to if someone can write with both hands, ambidextrous. But what it means is you can do 2 things at once as well. So his ambidextrous business model is called the exploit and explore model. And the exploit model is what most people do. Exploiting is where you have a product and you exploit it, you commercialize it, and you generate revenue from it. The explore model is when you go and look, in addition to exploiting, you go and look at other revenue streams as well. Is it maybe another iteration of that original product that you're currently exploiting? Or is it in fact a new product stream, or a new way you can generate revenue? Maybe it's something completely different that you've always harbored an interest in that the original product can now fund, and that's something I've used to build businesses myself. But having both in play means that whilst one is generating your revenue, you're then building the next thing, or trying something out and experimenting and seeing what other things you can do. And if you don't need to go any further than Warren Buffett, one of the richest people in the world, who said, you know, if you want to be poor, words to the effect, if you want to be poor, stick with one stream of income. Most people do that. It's their 9-to-5 job, okay? But if you want to, you know, successful rich people will focus more on multiple streams of income, so invest in new things. So there's innovation, and he innovates his way to get big fast, and this will of course be everything from the Kindle to the the Fire HD stick and things like that. Amazon has done its own Prime service where you can of course get things shipped to you faster. They're looking at drones. It was only last month, so in July 2016, they did a partnership, I believe, with here in the UK with our kind of air authority to look at drones dropping off packages within like an hour or so. And and there's many other things as well that have innovated. So from groceries getting to your door through to Prime movies to Amazon movies, of course, is going for the Netflix space to see if they can overtake that. But the key, this is the point of Jeff Bezos, this is why he wins, isn't just that he innovates, it's this, that he has detail in innovation, okay? He doesn't just think, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did that? Or even something a little bit more intelligent like, okay, we've got this product line, it would make sense to move from books to CDs. The thing that gets him ahead, he's an intelligent guy clearly, but the thing that gets him ahead is he looks at the mechanics of it as well. He looks at the operations, he looks at the logistics, he plays it out as well. So rather than just saying, right, we're going to go into this now, or I think that could work, or wouldn't that be interesting, he really looks at the detail. In essence, if what I'm saying is if you can try your best to structure and almost play out how it would look and what steps would be needed to innovate your next product line or offering, then that will mean that you are in a much better position to launch in the right direction. And investors love this. This is why the Kindle just struck gold, because it was a case that he had the idea, sure, but he also had, this is how we're going to do it. And my understanding is that Blue Origin, his space venture, is something along the same lines as well, and no doubt the rest of his products. A word on innovation. If you've got a wonderful product right now or service, whatever it is you do, it will eventually run stale. And I think I mentioned this with a Nike episode last week. And you know, you can't sell running shoes forever if you're Nike, because you've got Adidas selling tracksuits as well and all the training wear. So in fact, you have to then innovate to make sure you cover other things. But moreover, the point is that with many products, you'll end up getting a little bit, you'll sound or seem to be a little bit stale, and people want something to progress and move forward. And there's a company I'm about to do, which will be in the next episode, that you'll see where when they did this wrong, or they rather didn't do this at all pretty much, you end up with customers going, you know, it's just it's the same old stuff now. You're a one-trick pony, as it said, and then they move on to someone else. So you need to really always be, I believe, working this ambidexterity model and thinking about where you're going to move to in the future. So, you know, what's your next offering? At the very least, how are you going to repackage what you offer right now with a view to, you know, making it feel fresh again? Okay, number 3. I mean, this is pretty much, you could walk away. These two things, if you get this right, but we'll get a third lesson because that's what we do anyway. I struggled over this because I was thinking this, you know, this is Amazon in 25 minutes so far. But what I was trying to do is think what lesson really encapsulates the latter part. And you know, once they'd gone public, which was in the early 2000s, I believe. I think it was 2001, in fact, when Amazon went public. And you know, what was it that that encapsulates the way Jeff Bezos as a CEO was able to make sure that he could really get ahead and ride through problems and things like that. And I think it's this. It's belief. I'm going to crouch down so I can actually write. Belief through resilience. Resilient. Oh, hang on. Resilience. So what we've got here, I could rephrase this. Belief equals resilience. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. He was so deeply, passionately believing from back here in 94 that this was the way things was going to work out. He was seeing such long game, if you like, that there was unshaking belief, completely always set on the path. And no doubt there was probably a lot of things that kind of were thrown at him that we don't really know about along the way. But the key thing is he was utterly there was utter conviction, full commitment as well, leaving your job on Wall Street, you know, a secure job where you get paid lots of money, and focusing on this thing he knew was going to work out. And ultimately, it's a case of saying, well, if I know this thing is right, then I've just got to stick at it. And if you have enough belief, it will mean that you become resilient to all the things that could be thrown against you. Like with many big businesses, they've had a tax scandal. A little like Starbucks, of course, and not paying enough tax by being situated in certain regions, for instance. 2000 or turn of the century, let's call it 2001, I believe it was, when they had the dot-com bubble burst. He rode through that. 2008 recession as well. The business is still robust, and many more things have been thrown at Amazon, but because there's clear resilience, there's clear belief on the part of Jeff Bezos, it means that people buy into him as well. And if you have, it's said that if you have enough conviction about what it is you're doing, you're going to eventually get to a point where originally maybe people think you're a little bit mad. You'll ultimately be where people are saying, the guy believes so much. They might not even say it, might be a subconscious reaction to you. People start just following that because it's infectious, and it's also quite an addictive thing. People like hearing someone who's utterly convicted about, has got utter conviction about what they're saying. And ultimately means you can ride things out, because if you know you're doing the right thing, no matter how, I've said this recently, no matter how hard it is, you should be able to constantly push yourself through because you just know you're doing the right thing. And this is a little bit of a plea to those of you who are just starting out as an entrepreneur or a business startup owner. If you don't have enough belief in the product or service that you're about to try and embark on selling, what's going to happen is, and I'm telling you, it's an inevitability because there's no company around that's made it that hasn't had hardship. Things will get difficult. There will be things thrown against you that were completely out of control. There'll be completely, curveballs, things you weren't able to predict. And if that's going to happen, you need to be able to rally yourself and say, but I know I'm on the right track. And you'll only have that ability if you believe. Even on a more simplistic scale, and I've said this recently, if it's 4 a.m, and you're so worn out and you're tired and your business has generated no sales this month so far, for instance, you need to draw on something to be able to push yourself on. If you're just jumping on the hype train, and seriously, this is the thing, if you're jumping on a hype train, oh look, there's someone over here who does this thing and they are making money on it. Yeah, probably because that's their thing, that's their passion, and it's hardwired to their DNA that they should be doing that. I'm going to run over here and try that. If you're doing it purely because you think I could make a load of money off it, rather than doing things for the right reason, thinking about the customer value, thinking about where the business is ultimately going to be, if you're not doing it with a real sense of a mission, okay, and Amazon is here to create history. That's part of their slogan. I can't remember the rest of it. I think it was be good, do nice things, or whatever, something like that. And I think it was be nice, grow, or something, and make history. But that's the main thing. If you've got a real mission, you want to change things. All the people that often entrepreneurs and business owners really look up to. Look at Elon Musk. Many people love this person. Very few have a bad word to say about him. The guy wants to change the world. He has a vision of what things can do good. Get on this bandwagon instead of the short-termist hype one. I know it sounds like I'm being a little bit philosophical, but I've been through this enough, and what happens is you can draw on it because you think, do you know what, but how can I not? How can I not give my all to this thing? Because what I'm doing, my mission here is so important, and it goes beyond making me a millionaire, okay? If I make myself wealthy, well, good, now what? You see what I mean? It's not about making money. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to say this, and many of you are probably in exactly the same position. When you make plenty of money, you get to a point where you think, well, it needs to now be something that's worthwhile, because actually I've got the things I need. I'm a happy person. I need to now think, well, what is it that I'm actually delivering? Is it something that's giving back and ultimately doing good? With all of this, you're invincible, and at least you're going to be less likely to be flappable, and you get to a point where you're feeling a lot more resilient. So there's a little bit of an emotional ending, but I think that this is crucial. And it doesn't mean you have to stop the world and completely change things if you feel you are slightly on the hype train, but be warned that if things start getting hard and you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you're doing it because you think you can make a quick buck here or there, and you're not looking beyond it at your ultimate mission and where you want to eventually be, then you're going to find it hard to get out of bed in the morning after a while, because actually you just be thinking to yourself, do you know what? There's no why here. I'm making a load of money, but there's no why. And maybe you're doing something else or whatever it might be. But unless there's a real why and a mission, you're not going to be there. So These three things are so integral to the Amazon growth. If you look at any sources, these things are spilling out all over the place. And I think that, as usual, and it proves the point of Startup Business TV, you can look at big companies, look at how they start, and there's so many things that are translatable to what you're doing now. But these are some really important lessons. This guy is he's just an absolute beast of innovation, but also he's building he's always had this robust business underneath him, and it's about making sure that you're creating foundations that are always there and strong as you go. Okay, anyway, I hope that's been fun. If you feel that this is of any use, please give me the thumbs up on the video, and many of you are doing that already. Stick in a comment as well if you have any lessons that you want to add from Amazon too. If you hate this, you think it's a terrible idea, give me the thumbs down, and of course unsubscribe, because it's the worst idea being on this channel. But otherwise, go share it, and I'll see you on the next video, and hopefully have a bit more fun with the next episode. Take care.